Hey y'all, welcome back to Moonli. Today we're going to be talking about my endo story. I have talked about it on my Instagram account, moonli.woman, and just like some of the other information about endometriosis if you want to learn about it. And I've also talked about it on my blog, my experience, and more about endometriosis. So I will refer you guys down below if you want to hear about it in like word form. But today I'm going to talk about my story all in video, so let's get started. Well, I actually started my period when I was 10. I was fairly young, and essentially my mom even thought like, why does my 10-year-old have a period? Like, most people start the period when they're 12 or 13, but this was my story, so she just accepted it. And my first few cycles actually weren't that painful. It wasn't until I was about maybe 11 that they started getting really painful. So I would get this, like on the first day of my period, I'd get this super painful dull ache down my leg. It hurt so bad, and I'd be stuck in the bathroom on the toilet with diarrhea, heavy bleeding, and I would just wet a washcloth and actually chew on it to get through the uterus contractions of trying to push my period out. And that would last for about 6 hours. That just became my norm. Luckily, I started in the middle of the night. Sometimes I would go to school the next day, and then sometimes I would be so overly exhausted from being up all night in pain I wouldn't go at all. And then that also led into me having issues with migraines at school. So there were many times where I'd go to school and I could just start having an aura in my left eye. And so basically, if you guys don't know what an aura is, the best way to explain it, look it up on YouTube. But it's almost, for me, as if I can't see a certain part of things. So I could be looking at my phone, but I can't see certain letters that are spelled out on it. And then that's how I know I'm getting ready to get a migraine. And once I can't see those little letters, eventually it almost looks like a fan in that little section of my eye, like up in the corner. And then I know I'm about to get a horrible migraine. So my mom would come and get me, pick me up, I would throw up on the way home, and then I would just sit in the house the rest of the day crying with super horrific migraine, and that was it. And then my cramps, period cramps, transferred into another type of cramp, which would be like someone was taking a knife and actually scraping the inside of my vagina out. And whatever position that I was in when it started, that was the position I was locked in for 15 minutes. There was no transferring. That was it. Nothing's changing. So I just accepted it, and once I was stuck in that position, that was it. But there was one time when I was at school and I started my period, and I knew it was coming because I could just feel it. I was like, oh, it's coming. It's gonna be super painful. So I excused myself to the bathroom, but by the time I made it to the stall, I was locked in. I was in that position for 15 minutes. I knew it. So I managed at that time to actually have a cell phone, which is super beneficial because I called my mom. I said, Mom, can you call the school to let them know I have not left? Like, I'm not playing hooky. I'm just stuck in the bathroom because I can't move because of my cramps. And she obviously understood that. She's seen me in the amount of pain with my period. So she called the school, and then she came and got me afterwards when I could finally walk to take me home, because obviously my migraine was going to set in, and the heavy bleeding and everything on top of that was going to set in. And then by the time I got to 8th grade, we were running for gym class. So I was always a competitive swimmer, so I never had to worry about running until I started middle school gym. And every time I would run, I noticed that I would get the same period-like cramps. So I would get that sharp pain through my vagina, and I would get that dull ache through my leg, and it would put me in the bathroom needing to poo. So my mom said, you know what, you were missing so much swim team, you're in so much pain, you're missing school, we've got to do something. So we went to the doctor. And essentially, my pleasant, conventional doctor said, so either you can have a baby or you can go on birth control. Yeah, that's what she said to an 8th grader. So obviously I went on the birth control pill. My mom at that time had asked her about endometriosis because my aunt actually was diagnosed with it when she was in high school. And she said, look, this seems like the exact same thing that my sister went through. Could it be endo? And the doctor was like, no, she's just super unlucky. Like, she just has really bad periods. That's just how it's going to be. So the birth control pill will help her. I'm not going to say the birth control pill didn't help. I'd say it probably helped for about, in terms of the day, like my actual period, it helped for maybe 3 or 4 years. Don't get me wrong, it did help in that terms, but we'll keep going on in this story to find out why it actually didn't help. So then my 9th grade year, I actually had my first surgery. So if you see this little scar here, I had my shoulder surgery because I was actually a butterflyer and I tore my labrum in my shoulder, so I had that surgery, and then I tried to get back into swimming. But what I noticed when I got back into swimming was that I was actually getting this super horrible back pain like this. It was similar to the leg pain, but it was different to the point where when I laid down, I just wanted to scream. It just felt like my spine was locked into place, and They put me in physical therapy for it. They're like, oh, it's just a strained muscle because you're getting back into swimming after taking time off and you haven't had time off from your sport in ages. And then one day I was at home doing my exercises and I was doing a plank, like just on my forearms doing a plank, and all of a sudden it felt like someone had punched me in my sacrum, and it felt as though my spine and sacrum were just one, and it was a horrific pain. I could still walk, but I was on ice the rest of the day. And then the next morning I woke up and I couldn't move. I mean, I could feel my feet, I could feel my legs, but I could physically not move because of the amount of pain that I was in. So I went to the doctor. My mom drove me to the doctor. She's trying to drive as slow as she can because I'm in so much pain. And she's like, my mom is just like, how can you be like 15 and have this many issues? It doesn't make sense. So we got to the doctor. They did an x-ray and they found that my L3, L4, and L5 were bulging, like the disc inside of them were actually bulging out. And I was put back in physical therapy, but to deal with those issues. And a few months later, I got some numbing and tingling down my legs, and I told the doctors, they told me it was all in my head, that they would try maybe steroid shots because based on the bulging from my disc, I should not have tingling and numbing. So I did these really painful steroid shots in my back that I absolutely hated more than anything, and they never helped. Never. There was never one day that I could say, yes, that really helps. No, it never helped. Waste of insurance money. And then they finally agreed, okay, she's having tingling and numbing. She's not going to stop talking about it. Her mom's continually advocating for her. Let's just try this one thing. And I can't remember what this test was called. Essentially, it's this little machine that they take these little needles and they stick you in your legs. And those little needles connect to your nerves. And they can tell the person that's doing it, so my doctor, whether or not there's a disconnect between my nerves. And so he did it. Super painful at first. It's not that bad, but it actually hurts after a while because it's about 20 minutes long of these little needles like being poked in your legs. And turns out I was not insane and it wasn't all in my head. He was able to say to me, yeah, there's a disconnect. Like there's definitely a problem and it's not in your head. I can see the disconnect in your left leg. There's a nerve disconnect there and we need to do something about it. So they referred me on to a surgeon who went in and opened up my canal so that my nerves could move through my spine. And yeah, that was a super horrific surgery. I didn't realize how much your back plays into your entire body. I would say that surgery helped with the tingling and numbing a little bit. I still have it till today, but it's not as bad as it was. I wasn't, like, before the surgery, I wasn't even able to walk from the student parking lot into school. I had been parking where the teachers park, like next to the front door to the school because of how quickly the numbing would come on. So I would say the tingling and numbing got better. The back pain never got any better. That was just it. I just had accepted, you know what? I'm putting up my hands and saying, I'm just going to be in back pain the rest of my life. That's just how it is. There's nothing else I can do about it. And then I went to my first year of college and I hated the place I went. But when I was there, I'd noticed this super sharp pain in my groin area, and I eventually went home and went to the doctor, and they found that I had FAI, which is essentially extra bone growth on my pelvis going into my actual leg itself, and it was tearing my labrum a little bit. So they went in, they did the surgery for that, and the sharp pain got better. The hips being locked and feeling like I don't really have that much flexibility became a normal. I think I just kind of accepted I'm just gonna have back and hip pain the rest of my life, and that's my body, and I'm not gonna fight it anymore. And so going back, I actually was put on high blood pressure medication not long after I was put on the hormonal birth control pill. And I was really young, doctors didn't understand, my mom didn't understand. She was just thinking, how is my daughter on high blood pressure medication? They just assumed that it was genetic because my dad had high blood pressure and my grandma, so it must just be that I'm a really young person with really bad genetics. So we accepted that. And then moving forward, I made it through college, graduated, and then I moved to Boulder, Colorado. Really great place if you get the chance. Totally visit. It's absolutely beautiful. The people are absolutely lovely. And I moved there, and when I was there, I actually had what they called back then a panic attack. So I was sitting on my living room couch one day, and one of the girls from work was coming over because we were gonna go swimming in my pool, and it felt as though my heart had stopped, like a heart palpitation, and then it just picked up. It just kept going and going to the point where I had 911 dialed on my phone just in case I was gonna hit the ground. I just wouldn't be able to hit the call button and then hit the ground. But it never came. I never passed out. My heart just kept racing and racing. So I drove myself to the hospital. And so my high blood pressure usually ranged between like 130 over 90 to 140 over 100. That was usually my high blood pressure area. And when I got to the emergency room, I think I was at 170 over 110, and my heart rate was 133, and I was just sitting there on the bed. I had not exercised that day. I was watching Goosebumps on my couch. And so they ran all these heart attack tests, and they just said, we can't come up with anything. You're fine, you're healthy, you look healthy, so I'm sure it was nothing. So I went back home. A few days later, I went back to the emergency room, same thing, the blood pressure was super high, my heart rate was high. They did notice that my heart rate would go back down to about 86, and then I would get that heart palpitation, and within a second, it would jump up to 140, and they couldn't figure out why, but they're just like, you know, we can't find anything, we've run the test, we've looked to see if you're having a heart attack, we can't find any disorders, we don't know. So, thanks to conventional medicine. Yeah, and so as that continued, I would get this super heavy chest pain feeling. I just accepted that this must be panic attacks, because at this time I was also going through PTSD symptoms that I didn't realize was PTSD until later on. So I'd get this super heavy pain in my chest. I would still get the random heart palpitations, random heart starts racing, and I dealt with this for another 8 months. It sucked, because I even went to Thailand, and even just in the security line to get through the Denver airport to fly away, I probably had 6 panic attacks, and I wanted to hold the person in front of me. I wanted to grab her hand and say, I'm so sorry, I just need to reattach to something that's gonna bring me back to my reality, because my heart is taking off and I feel like I'm gonna die. That's what it felt like. And then, yes, moving forward, if you guys haven't seen my video, I talk about how I came up with Moonli, like the story behind Moonli. I will link it below. So briefly, I actually started researching period poverty, and that's where I started educating myself about the menstrual cycle, and kept coming across this word endometriosis, which I had heard before because my mom had brought it up at the doctor's offices. And I kept looking over the symptoms, and I was just thinking, I still have a lot of these symptoms. I mean, I was still on the birth control pill, but my cramps the past 3 years prior to that were still getting worse. I would start my period and I would still have to take painkillers just to get through it. So the birth control was no longer working. I was going on runs now that I was back in Australia, because I didn't have the money to join a gym, and I still don't. So I was running, and I would notice after about 15 minutes of running, there was this point where my body said, you're done, and I would get those period cramps. I would get that sharp pain through my vagina, that sharp pain down my leg, and I would have to hurry up and get home before I hit the ground. So I would get in the house, I'd either hit the couch or hit the bathroom floor, and I would have to eventually get to the toilet, and within 15 minutes of being in that horrific pain, I would eventually pass poo, and the pain would be completely gone. I'd be a completely different person. I've dealt with it for ages, but because I hadn't ran in so long, I just was like, you know what, this is just running. I'm just gonna have to stop running before 15 minutes, because that seems to be my mark. And as I kept coming across this word endo, though, I started to realize that my symptoms lined up with a lot of it. Look, the migraines, I didn't say this, but the chronic yeast infections. I always had chronic yeast infections. I had the pain down the leg, the pain in the back, the heavy period, the clotting period, and yeah, like the need to rely on birth control. And then after a certain amount of time, it just stopped working, which is quite common with people with endo. And I just finally did all of my quality research, made a little note card, and I told my partner, hey, I'm flying back to the US where I have health insurance, and I'm gonna speak to someone about this. Because one, I'm sick of being in pain, and two, I was worried about my fertility. Like, what are my chances of fertility? Because my aunt with it was actually told she was never gonna be able to have kids, and so she just didn't worry about it, but she eventually did end up getting pregnant. So that's all that worked out. So either way, it worked out fine for her. But originally they had told her she would never be able to conceive. So I went home, and you know the story. First doctor said, yeah, no, you're totally fine. Forget it. Second doctor believed me, and she was like, I don't know what else it could be. You've done quality research, and yes, I will do your surgery. I'd be honored to do it. So yeah, she performed my surgery, and during this time, going back a little bit, I actually, before I went to that second doctor, I went to the emergency room for this super sharp stomach pain, and they were thinking it was ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, which are 2 autoimmune diseases, and they both run in my family. Turns out it wasn't, but they said I was super constipated. It's like, okay, well, I poo every day, so that must be wrong. So I went to a gastro doctor who put me on this like colon cleanse because she would do a colonoscopy, and she pretty much said my colon and rectum were so stretched that she didn't know if they'd ever go back to the original size. And she couldn't figure out why I couldn't poop. She just figured it was a brain disconnect between my brain and my colon, and that was it. Oh, the beauties of being dismissed. But I can tell you, when I did that cleanse for that colonoscopy, remember those panic attack-like symptoms I was having in Colorado that I had for ages? They finally went away. The amount of pressure that was on my chest all the time, the pressure on my heart, the heart palpitations, the random heart rate taking off like it would with a panic attack, were gone. I never dealt with it again. I had never felt so good in my entire life. Granted, my back and hip were still hurting, but that panic-like symptoms were completely gone. And it was because I needed to poo, and there is a major nerve that runs through your colon, and I'd imagine poo all of these years being stuck on it just put so much pressure on it. Obviously, I don't have any confirmation of this from the doctors because I tried talking to the doctor about it, and she was like, well, there's no research on it, so why are we gonna talk about this? Yes. So going back, I finally went into my endo surgery, and yeah, she diagnosed me with stage 2 endo. I had endo on my right ovary, I had it all over my pelvis, and I had it all over my bowel and my rectum. And she said, that was your constipation issue. She said, let me know if your constipation gets any better because your rectum and bowel were covered in endo. And obviously the first few, like 2 or 3 weeks out of surgery, of course, I was in pain, that was expected. But about week 3, week 4, I felt the best I had ever felt since I was about 7 years old. I mean, my back pain was gone. My hip pain was gone. I could do like, you know, that little squatting position you do in yoga, not the crow, I can't think of what it's called. I could finally get my heels to the ground. I could move my pelvis, and I could poo 3 to 4 times a day easily without any help of like Macrogol or Miralax, all of that. I could finally poo without any help. And that was such relief, like I could actually poo now. And ever since I can poo, my blood pressure is about 101/70. My heart rate, which stood at 86 since I was about in 9th grade, has gone down to like 75 on the normal day. My body is in so much better shape ever since I was able to correct endometriosis. And for me, I know obviously endo is a super rough disease to live with. I still live with it. Obviously my surgeon did ablation and excision, and I still struggle with constipation. I take herbal remedies to help with it now, so I make sure that I poo 3 to 4 times a day. But I'm making this video because I don't want people to think that their pain is normal. It's not normal, and don't let anyone dismiss it. And I want you to know that just because you have all of these other issues, you think that they're separate. Endo impacts so much of our entire bodies. I mean, there's people with endo that grow on their heart, their brain, their nose, their lungs, their liver. I mean, endo has grown in so many places, and for me, I should have never had back or hip surgery. I should have never been on high blood pressure medication. If that doctor, when I was in 8th grade, would have just listened to my mom and said, could this be endo? And they would have looked into it more, I could have possibly skipped 2 surgeries. Being on high blood pressure medication, wouldn't have had to go into the emergency room for my panic-like symptoms. I would have saved so many years of not being in pain. I can't express enough how empowering it was for me to be like educate myself, to go into the doctor and say, no, you're not going to ignore me. And now today I stand here to tell you all that you can do it, and I hope on this YouTube account or Instagram or my blog that you can get the information that you need to be able to advocate for yourself. Your pain is not normal. I can't say that it's going to be endo, but it's not normal, and there has to be a reason for it. I have endo fibroid. I also have fibroids. Found that out too. Endos, fibroids, and ovarian cyst. None of it is normal, but it's something that I'm constantly dealing with today, and that I'm constantly battling. In another video, I will go more into detail about what I do to deal with my endo, because it's a long list that I've gone through, but today I just wanted to talk about my endo story and just share it with you all. And I am super thankful for my mom having great private health insurance so that I could have this surgery. I know it's an incredible privilege to be able to have all of these surgeries and access to the type of care that I've had, especially like birth control pills. But for me, I'm advocating to tell you that it's not normal and there is a root cause to what you're going through, and you deserve to find the right answers for it. Well, thanks for visiting Moonli. I hope you enjoyed my endo story. I know it was a little TMI at times, but that's what Moonli is about. We're here to be honest, be open about our bodily symptoms, and yeah, we're gonna try to get people onto advocating for themselves in any way possible. So yes, if you have enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, and you can follow along on my blog. And if you want to message me, have any questions, let me know. Thanks for visiting. Bye!